Week 15 of the fantasy football season, with playoffs starting in most fantasy leagues. Here's the top 36 running backs I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Christian McCaffrey of the San Francisco 49ers. What a matchup it should be this week for McCaffrey. Tennessee, they can't stop anyone. CMC coming off a bye and having a monster season. I think this week could possibly be his best game of the year. Number 2, Jahmyr Gibbs of the Detroit Lions. Another big game it was for Jahmyr Gibbs in last week's game. And they're lining him up more as a wide receiver as well, where we saw that last week, where he was in the slot, out of the backfield, different formations. He was in that ball game versus the Cowboys. And this week at the Rams, they know they got to put points on the board. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs once again is up for the challenge. Number 3, Devon Achane of the Miami Dolphins. Devon Achane, it's been a big season for him. I know last week he left the game in the first half with the rib injury, but Mike McDaniel, head coach, and even Achane said he could have came back in the game, but they were up big and obviously went to the bench with Jalen Wright, who had a good game. So this week, Monday night game, a little tricky maybe, but I think Achane should be good to go, even though Miami's 6-7 and not going to make the playoffs this week at Pittsburgh. Number 4, Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. So Bijan, it's been an up and down season at times for Bijan Robinson and this offense, Atlanta Falcon team. But Bijan, we know he can do a little bit of everything. Catch the football out of the backfield. Another running back that lines up in the slot and as a receiver at times. And this week at Tampa Bay on a Thursday night game, usually high scoring. I think he goes out there and bounces back this week. Number 5, Derrick Henry of the Baltimore Ravens. So this Raven offense has been a total mess over the last month of the season. Besides Derrick Henry, no one's been consistent. I know Zay Flowers had a big game last week, but Derrick Henry, he's going to go out there and get his points. And this week it's a great matchup versus one of the worst defenses in the league at Cincinnati. And we saw a couple weeks ago on Thanksgiving, he had a nice game versus same defense. Number 6, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills. So fumbling has been an issue over the last few weeks here for James Cook. But besides that, he's one of the better running backs in all fantasy football. This week, a big division matchup at the New England Patriots, where their defense is middle of the pack versus the run. But James Cook, he's been a matchup-proof running back once again all season long. And this week, I believe he could go out there and have a good ball game. Again, number 7, Saquon Barkley of the Philadelphia Eagles. So maybe I'm higher on Saquon than consensus going into the week. But this week, a slam dunk matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. We saw Denver have their way running the football all over them last week. And we saw Barkley break out finally with a big game at the Chargers in last week's ball game, going 120 yards and a touchdown. I know 52-yard touchdown he had in that one. But this week, I think they're going to ride Barkley once again versus this Vegas Raider team. And they'll have a good game. Number 8, Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's been a good season for Travis Etienne, and this week a slam dunk matchup versus the New York Jets, where they gave up 200 yards rushing to the Miami Dolphins last week. So Etienne, he's doing a little bit of everything for this Jacksonville Jaguar team, and this week with a great matchup versus Jets, I expect a nice game from him. Number 9, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So Bucky Irving, a couple weeks back in the lineup, and he's finding the end zone 2 weeks in a row, and he's still the bell cow over there. I know Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, they're mixed in at times in this offense for this Tampa Bay Buc team. But this week, a great matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons on Thursday Night Football coming in, where these games are usually high scoring, and I think Irving will go out there once again, and it wouldn't be surprising if he finds the end zone for the 3rd week in a row. Number 10, Josh Jacobs of the Green Bay Packers. So this week, definitely a tough matchup, obviously, at the Denver Broncos. One of the best defenses in the league, but Jacobs, they run the offense pretty much through him. There's nothing going on in the passing game for this Packer team besides Christian Watson. If the weather's going to be bad, there's just going to be a lot of running the football, and both these teams will run first, obviously, with the Packers in Denver. So I think Jacobs on workload alone and just the numbers he's putting up this season, he's usually a top 10 option weekly. Number 11, Javonte Williams of the Dallas Cowboys. So it's been a great first season for Javonte Williams with the Cowboys. So this week, Minnesota Vikings are coming into town. Javonte Williams, he's been matchup proof all season long. Physical in between the tackles, catch the football out of the backfield, and there's no competition over there. Miles Sanders, he's been out a while, out for the season. Also, Malik Davis, he's a change of pace back, but not really doing much this week versus the Vikings, even though I know their defense played great last week versus the Commanders. I think Williams has a good game. 12, Chase Brown of the Cincinnati Bengals. Last week, it was a big game for Chase Brown, finding the end zone twice versus the Buffalo Bills. So Chase Brown, he's a do-it-all type of running back. I know a small running back, but this week it's a good matchup versus the Baltimore Ravens. And a couple weeks ago, he had a good ball game versus defense. I think Chase Brown, he's going to go out there this week and have another good performance. 13, Trevion Henderson of the New England Patriots. So Trevion Henderson, it's been a good rookie season for him, and they just got to give this kid the reign. And now after the bye week here, we see rookies get more touches, more opportunities, and more in the playbook. And this week, it's a pretty good matchup. The Buffalo Bills coming in. This Bill run defense isn't all that great. We saw Chase Brown last week have a good game, and we've seen it time after time. Running backs go out there this season and put up numbers. So Henderson, as long as he's getting a healthy workload, he's going to be a top 15 option, I think, this week. 14, Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. So Taylor, he was off to an MVP-type start, and this whole offense, obviously, and Taylor's numbers have gone down over the last month of the season. And now, obviously, Daniel Jones out for the year, torn Achilles. Teams are going to load the box and force either Leonard, Brett Rypien, or even Phillip Rivers, who they signed to a practice squad deal, try to beat them. And this is a very tough matchup in Seattle, where they're one of the best defenses in the league, and especially the last month of the season, they've been the best defense in the league. So it's a tough matchup, but still, you got this far of the season to the fantasy playoffs with Taylor. You just got to put him in the lineup, even in a tough matchup in Seattle, where I'm saying, though, his numbers are definitely going to take a hit. Once again, 15, R.J. Harvey of the Denver Broncos. So R.J. Harvey, ever since J.K. Dobbins went out with injury, Harvey's been the bell cow in that backfield. Tyler Beatty, Jaleel McLaughlin, they're not been a factor. I know this week a tougher matchup. Green Bay coming in, one of the better defenses in the league. But Harvey, he could do it all. Catch the football out of the backfield, physical in between the tackles, even though he's a smaller back. And this is a run-first team as well in Denver, especially in this type of climate where I think the weather is going to be cold, obviously, and possibly snow. 16, Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. So definitely Blake Corum's been eating into the workload over the last month of the season, and even the coaching staff has said they want to give Williams less touches, get Corum more involved, that he's fresh for the playoffs. So this week, another high-scoring game. I believe it's going to be for the Rams versus the Lions coming in. The game, one of the better games of the week, obviously. But Kyren, weekly, it seems like he's still getting that 12, 15-point fantasy range. So this week, I think he could be decent for owners once again, even if some of his touches are taken away from Corum. 17, Breece Hall of the New York Jets. And Breece Hall, he's been solid once again this season. I know this Jet team, they might have to go with the rookie Cook, who came in last week. He didn't look good, and rightfully so. He's the third-string quarterback. So we'll see if it's Taylor back in the lineup, Fields, or Cook once again. But this week, it's an okay matchup at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Hall's a dual threat out of the backfield, catching the football, running between the tackles. The only thing this season, I want to see him catch the football a little bit more. But obviously, I don't think Week 15 it's going to change much. 18, Devin Neal of the New Orleans Saints. I think Devin Neal's looked like the better back between him and Alvin Kamara. More physical back in the backfield than Kamara. Obviously, Kamara at the latter part of his career, we know running backs break down at 30 years old. And also Neal, he's making plays the last couple weeks, going out there and putting up some decent numbers. So this week, I know it's not a great matchup with Carolina coming in, but volume's been there. And also, they like running the football with Neal more than they did with Kamara, it seems like, for this New Orleans Saints team. 19, Woody Marks of the Houston Texans. So Woody Marks, he's the bell cow now over there. Chubb banged up. Dare Agumbawale, he's not really going to get touches. And Marks, he got banged up in last week's game versus the Chiefs, but he came back and they won that one 20-10. So this week, a great matchup versus the Arizona Cardinals coming into town. Their defense really can't stop anyone. We saw Kyren and Corum go off for nice games last week. 20-ish and Ginty of the Vegas Raiders. It's been a mixed bag of results for Ginty, where he was a first, second rounder in most fantasy drafts. And this week, a very tough matchup at the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the best run defenses in the league, even though I thought Hampton and Kamini Vidal did a decent job in last week's ball game. But right now, we know this offensive line isn't good at Philadelphia. But at this point, I think fantasy owners, to be honest, they might not have better options than Ginty. But like I said, the ceiling is low this week. 21, Jaylen Warren of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Last week, a nice screen touchdown he took to the end zone untouched. Physical in between the tackles. He's definitely a three-down back. And this offense looked to get back on track a little bit last week in a hostile environment in Baltimore and win that game. And Aaron Rodgers turning the clock a little bit. So this week, Monday Night Football, good matchup. Miami coming in, not a good defense. And I think Warren, he's been a solid fantasy player this year. 22, DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. So DeAndre Swift, still the guy by a little bit over there, getting a little more touches in Chicago, even though Kyle Monunga, he's been a goal line back at times this season as well. So DeAndre Swift, Cleveland, they got a good defense, even though Tony Pollard went out there and gashed him over 130 yards and found the end zone twice in last week's game. But I think DeAndre Swift, he could go out there in a decent ball game in Soldier Field with Cleveland coming in and still find some running lanes. 23, Quinshon Judkins of the Cleveland Browns. Judkins, it's been up and down with Judkins this season. Last week he had a big play, but besides that, he didn't do much in that game. And the Chicago Bear defense has been improved over the last couple weeks. So for the rookie to go into Soldier Field, I think the game plan for this Bear team, they're going to try to get after Shedeur Sanders early and often. And obviously, they're going to try to bottle up the run and make Shedeur try to beat him, even though last week Shedeur did have a good game. But this Bear defense, to me, is better than Tennessee. So I think Judkins, it could be a tough ball game for him in Soldier Field. And also, as well, he's not much of a pass catcher out of the backfield. 24, Rico Dowdle of the Carolina Panthers. And now it's back to a committee once again over there. I know Dowdle early in the season had a few games in a row over 200 yards from scrimmage. And this week it is a good matchup indoors in New Orleans. They're one of the worst defenses in the league. But like I said, Chuba Hubbard in the game before the bye, he was the guy over there in that backfield. So right now, to me, it looks like a 50-50 split, but I still will give the edge to Rico Dowdle, more explosive in the backfield and a more physical back as well, where he'll get those goal line touches. Worst case, 25, Aaron Jones of the Minnesota Vikings. I know Aaron Jones, he's had a great track record in his career versus the Dallas Cowboys, but Aaron Jones, I just think the ceiling isn't that high for Aaron Jones. It's not a great matchup where this run defense of Dallas, since training for Quinnen Williams, has been one of the better run defenses in the league. Frank Clark, he's been a great add in that Micah Parsons deal as well. So it's going to be tough to find some running lanes. And also Jordan Mason's been getting some work as well. 26, Amarian Hampton of the Los Angeles Chargers. So last week he returned to the lineup and he had a pretty decent game. He found the end zone on a 4-yard touchdown, but him and Kamini Vidal pretty much was a 50-50 split. But I think this week we'll see Hampton get the football a little bit more. He looked healthy. He had some burst. He was breaking some tackles in that game. But this week a very tough matchup. And like I said, if he's in a 50-50 split in a tough matchup, the ceiling to me just isn't that high. 27, Kenneth Walker of the Seattle Seahawks. It's just been weird this season. Seattle, for the majority of these games, it's either been the defense or JSN scoring, where the running game hasn't really done much, even though it's been a potent backfield in Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet. But in terms of fantasy points, these guys haven't done much. So this week it is a good matchup versus Indianapolis coming in. But I think, once again, this defense is going to dominate the Seattle Seahawks. They're going to create turnovers, get in field range, and that's why I think the ceiling could be cut down a little bit for Walker this week. 28, Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. So like I said, Hubbard looked like the better running back going back a few weeks ago for this Carolina Panther team. And this week it's a good matchup at the New Orleans Saints. Indoors, don't have to deal with the outside elements, and the Saint defense really can't stop anyone. But like I said earlier, I would give the advantage to Rico Dowdle just a little bit with his goal line prowess. 29, Tyrone Tracy of the New York Giants. So Tyrone Tracy, he got banged up a little bit in that New England game in Week 13 before the bye. But Tracy's still the better back, in my opinion, over there in New York. Could catch the football out of the backfield. Still physical back in between the tackles. And he's got more home run ability breaking one off than Devin Singletary. And this week it is a good matchup with the Commanders coming in. 30, Kyle Monangai of the Chicago Bears. To me, he's the more physical running back in between the tackles. And also he's getting his goal line touches as well, is Kyle Monangai in the backfield for the Chicago Bear team. But this week with the Cleveland Browns coming in, it could be a little tough. But like I said as well, Tony Pollard, who did nothing all season long, went out there and went over 100 yards and found the end zone twice. 31, Kareem Hunt, the Kansas City Chiefs. So Kareem Hunt, it's been an alright season for Kareem Hunt. I know Isaiah Pacheco's been back in the lineup over the last few weeks, but to me, I've been saying this in other videos as well, that it's Kareem Hunt's backfield. Better pass catcher out of the backfield, more physical back where he's getting the goal line touches. And this week, it's a mediocre matchup versus the Chargers. We know last week Saquon Barkley had a good game versus defense. I think Hunt, if you're in desperation mode, could be a decent flex option. 32, Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. So like I said, Tony Pollard broke out last week, had a big game, but that was a fluky game to me, where Cleveland's defense has been good all season, but he just got past the secondary in a lot of second level runs in that game for big yards. So this week at San Francisco, I don't see the Niners in this one letting Tony Pollard beat them. This defense has been great over the last few weeks, even with Warner and Bosa out for the season. And Robert Saleh, he's not a good head coach, but a good defensive coordinator. So this week, I think Tony Pollard's ceiling isn't as high, obviously, as last week. 33, Blake Corum of the Los Angeles Rams. He's getting more touches weekly as Blake Corum. He looks like the more agile and the quicker running back between him and Kyren Williams, making plays in that backfield. So pretty much this is close to becoming a 50-50 split. And they said they want to give Kyren some rest and more work to Corum, that he's fresher for the playoffs. So this week in a matchup in a high-scoring game, most likely versus the Lions, I wouldn't be opposed to Blake Corum being a flex option this week. 34, Chris Rodriguez of the Washington Commanders. So this week, a good matchup at the New York Giants. Krosky Merritt, Jeremy McNichols, they haven't been factors in this backfield over the last few weeks here for this Washington Commander team. And Chris Rodriguez, the only thing with him, you don't catch the football much out of the backfield, and this Commander team don't really play with leads at all, where they're 3-10 on the year, where they got to pass a whole lot. So that's why his ceiling to me isn't as high. 35 staying in the same game. Devin Singletary of the New York Giants. So this week, good matchup with Washington coming in. We saw Singletary do damage a couple weeks ago on Monday night versus the Patriots. I know it was a game out of reach. It was garbage time, but Singletary and Tracy are in a 50-50 split. And Singletary more in between the tackles and possibly even more times at the goal line as well, getting an opportunity. But still, if you're in the playoffs and you got Singletary in your lineup, it could be tough sledding this week. 36 and final backs, Kamini Vidal, the Los Angeles Chargers. So to start the game, he started it. Was Kamini Vidal for this Los Angeles Charger team. But as the game went on, it was pretty much a 50-50 split, and Hampton looked a little bit better in between the tackles. And Vidal, his day was made, though last week with a big 60-yard catch down the sidelines to put him obviously in scoring position. But Vidal's still a good back. But this week with a tough matchup at Kansas City, and I think they can run Hampton more, is this Charger team, where he looked pretty healthy in last week's game. He's a flex option at best. That's a top 36 running backs I'm ranking for Week 15 of the fantasy football season.